The principles of power haven't changed since Machiavelli wrote The Prince in 1513, but the mechanisms have evolved dramatically. Where Renaissance princes influenced city-states through political alliances, today's business leaders shape global behavior through digital platforms. The weapons have evolved, but the strategic thinking remains the same. Look around. Jeff Bezos doesn't rule a traditional kingdom. He influences purchasing decisions across global markets. Elon Musk doesn't command traditional armies. He shapes digital conversations and market movements. Mark Zuckerberg doesn't control physical territory. He mediates online human interaction itself. These leaders operate more like Renaissance princes than conventional CEOs, and their influence extends far beyond traditional corporate boundaries. Today, you'll learn how power structures actually function in 2025, who hold strategic influence, how they apply it, and most importantly, how you can understand these same principles for your own strategic thinking. 500 years ago, Niccolo Machiavelli observed that power flows to those who understand human nature better than their competition. That principle remains constant. What's transformed is the scale, the technological tools, and the sophistication of influence mechanisms. The modern strategic leader doesn't need traditional symbols of authority. They need platforms, data analytics, and the ability to shape perception at massive scale. They understand that in a hyper-connected world, attention represents the ultimate currency. Narrative becomes the ultimate strategic weapon, and psychological influence operates as the ultimate competitive advantage. Before we dive deep into how power structures operate in the digital age, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Chapter 1. The New Territories. Digital Principalities. Today's strategic leaders don't conquer traditional territories. They build digital ecosystems that others depend upon. Amazon doesn't just facilitate commerce, it creates the entire marketplace infrastructure that small businesses must navigate. When entrepreneurs want to reach customers, they must work within Amazon's framework, follow Amazon's guidelines, and accept Amazon's terms. This represents what business scholars call a platform monarchy, rather than a traditional company structure. Apple has created what technology researchers describe as a closed psychological ecosystem. Once users enter the Apple environment, iPhone, iPad, Mac, Watch, AirPods, switching becomes increasingly costly and complex. This isn't accidental market positioning. It's deliberate ecosystem architecture that makes traditional business models appear primitive by comparison. Google doesn't simply provide search results. According to information science research, it shapes how people understand reality. When Google's algorithm changes, entire industries shift overnight. Businesses rise and fall based on their relationship with these systems. This represents what digital media scholars call algorithmic governance at unprecedented scale. The attention economy Machiavelli wrote that the first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. Today's equivalent: judge a strategic leader by their ability to capture and monetize human attention systematically. Social media platforms, as analyzed by media researchers, don't sell products. They monetize human consciousness through advertising models. TikTok's algorithm, according to behavioral design studies, doesn't simply show videos. It analyzes behavioral patterns and delivers content engineered to maximize engagement duration. Netflix doesn't just recommend entertainment, it uses viewing data to predict and influence future preferences, as documented in UX research. This represents what communication theorists call Machiavellian psychology applied at unprecedented scale, shaping billions of individual decisions simultaneously. The most strategically successful people today understand that attention is finite, distraction is abundant, and whoever manages focus most effectively influences behavior most powerfully. Information as territory. In the digital age, managing information flow creates more strategic advantage than controlling physical territory. Traditional media gatekeepers have been replaced by algorithmic curators, but the fundamental principle remains: whoever influences what people see shapes what people think. Modern strategic leaders understand that reality is increasingly mediated through algorithms. Most people's worldview is shaped by their feeds, their search results, their recommended content. Influence those algorithms, and you shape perception. Guide those recommendations, and you direct behavior. This isn't about censorship. It's about what information scientists call algorithmic curation. The modern strategic leader doesn't need to suppress opposing viewpoints. They just need to ensure their perspective appears more frequently, more prominently, and more persuasively than alternatives. Chapter 2. Modern Power Structures. The Platform Empire Model. Traditional power structures were hierarchical. Kings ruled nobles who governed peasants. Modern power structures are platform-based. Whoever creates and controls the platform influences everyone who uses it. Consider how Uber transformed transportation without owning vehicles, how Airbnb dominated hospitality without owning properties, how Amazon Marketplace conquered retail without manufacturing products. They created platforms that others depend on, then extracted value from every transaction. This represents what business strategists call the modern leader's approach. Create the infrastructure that others need, then become indispensable to their success. The platform becomes the kingdom, and platform governance becomes sovereignty. Network effects as strategic moats. Medieval princes built castles with moats for protection. Modern strategic leaders build network effects that become stronger with each new user. Facebook becomes more valuable as more people join. LinkedIn's influence grows with each professional connection. Amazon's marketplace improves as more sellers and buyers participate. These network effects create what economists call winner-take-all dynamics. The first platform to achieve critical mass often dominates entire industries because switching becomes increasingly costly as the network grows. The modern Machiavellian principle. Don't just compete in existing networks. Create new ones where you establish the rules and frameworks. Data, as strategic intelligence information, has always represented power, but never at this scale or sophistication. Modern strategic leaders don't just collect data, they use it to predict and influence behavior with what researchers call surgical precision. Search histories reveal interests and intentions. Purchase patterns reveal values and priorities. Social connections reveal influence networks and tribal affiliations. Location data reveals habits and routines. Combined, this creates psychological profiles that would make Renaissance intelligence networks appear primitive. The most sophisticated modern strategic leaders use this data not just for targeted advertising, but to shape cultural conversations, influence political outcomes, and guide social movements. They understand that whoever manages the data most effectively influences the future most powerfully. Chapter 3. Digital Machiavellian Strategies. Algorithmic Influence. Modern strategic leaders have mastered what technology researchers call algorithmic statecraft, the art of shaping behavior through carefully designed systems that feel natural and voluntary to users. Social media algorithms, according to behavioral design studies, aren't just displaying content. They're training preferences, shaping opinions, and influencing decisions. The recommendation engine becomes what UX researchers call a behavior influence system that operates continuously without users realizing they're being guided. This represents what digital media scholars describe as Machiavellian influence perfected, powerful enough to shape millions of minds simultaneously, subtle enough that subjects believe their thoughts are entirely their own. Engineered consensus. Traditional rulers used propaganda. Modern strategic leaders use what communication researchers call data-driven influence operations that create the appearance of organic consensus while actually being carefully orchestrated campaigns. Trending topics, viral content, and social movements can be artificially amplified through bot networks, coordinated messaging, and algorithmic amplification. What appears to be grassroots enthusiasm is often what political scientists call astroturfing, manufactured grassroots movements funded and directed by interested parties. The modern strategic leader doesn't need to convince everyone, just enough people to create the impression that everyone already agrees. Social proof psychology does the rest. The engagement economy Machiavelli wrote about using fear strategically. Modern strategic leaders have discovered something even more powerful. What media researchers call manufactured engagement that drives attention and obscures rational analysis. Emotional content and tribal conflict create more engagement than calm reasoning. Controversial material spreads faster than factual content. Polarizing discussions generate more attention than nuanced dialogue. The modern strategic leader understands that in an attention economy, being ignored represents a greater threat than being criticized. They generate discussion, controversy, and engagement as strategic tools for maintaining relevance and influence. Chapter 4. Corporate Machiavellianism. Platform Leadership. Today's corporate leaders operate more like Renaissance princes than traditional business people. They must manage multiple stakeholder groups with conflicting interests while pursuing their strategic vision. Amazon's approach consistently chose long-term strategic advantage over short-term profits, systematically positioned against competitors through pricing strategies, and created a corporate culture where the founder's vision became organizational doctrine. Apple's ecosystem strategy creates customer relationships that business researchers compare to feudal loyalty structures. Users become invested in Apple's platforms, making switching costs prohibitively high while generating recurring revenue streams. These aren't just business strategies, they're exercises in what organizational behaviorists call digital statecraft. Regulatory strategy. Modern strategic leaders understand that in democratic societies, political influence often flows through regulatory relationships rather than direct control. They invest heavily in lobbying, political engagement, and regulatory relationships. Technology companies now spend more on lobbying than traditional industries like oil and pharmaceuticals. They hire former regulators, fund academic research that supports their positions, and shape policy discussions through think tanks and advocacy groups. This represents modern Machiavellianism, working within democratic systems while systematically influencing those systems to serve strategic interests. Global platform diplomacy. Multinational platforms must navigate complex relationships with national governments, each with different laws, cultural values, and political systems. This requires diplomatic skills that would be familiar to Renaissance strategists. Apple negotiates with various national authorities over data storage while maintaining different content policies for different markets. Facebook creates country-specific community guidelines while engaging European regulators about AI transparency requirements. These companies function as what international relations scholars call quasi-sovereign entities that must balance competing demands from multiple host governments while pursuing their global strategic objectives. Chapter 5. Personal power in the digital age. Building your platform. In the modern world, everyone benefits from thinking like a platform builder. Your career advancement, relationship networks, and strategic influence depend on your ability to create value systems that others want to participate in. This might mean building an email list, growing social media networks, developing professional communities, or creating content that others find valuable. The principle remains the same. Become a hub that others depend on, rather than depending entirely on others. Platforms. Your personal brand becomes your digital territory. Your content becomes your influence currency. Your network becomes your strategic base. Information advantage. In a world overflowing with information, the ability to identify, process, and act on valuable intelligence faster than others becomes a crucial competitive advantage. Modern strategic leaders excel at what researchers call information arbitrage, knowing things before others, understanding implications that others miss, and acting on insights while others are still processing data. This requires developing superior information sources, analytical frameworks, and decision-making processes. The goal is to consistently operate with better intelligence than your competition. Network navigation. Traditional networking focused on meeting people in person. Modern network building happens across digital platforms, virtual communities, and online influence networks. Understanding how different platforms function, who holds influence within various networks, and how to build genuine relationships in digital environments becomes essential for anyone seeking to build modern strategic influence. The key is becoming genuinely valuable to your network, rather than just extracting value from it. Provide intelligence, make connections, solve problems, and create opportunities for others. Chapter 6. The Psychology of Digital Influence. Behavioral Design. Modern strategic leaders have access to unprecedented insights into human psychology through behavioral data analysis. They understand exactly which stimuli trigger specific responses and can design experiences that reliably influence behavior. Variable reward schedules keep users checking social media. Scarcity messaging drives purchasing decisions. Social proof indicators influence opinions. Loss aversion tactics prevent user churn. These techniques are based on decades of psychological research, but applied with technological precision that would amaze traditional behavioral scientists. Identity as strategic territory. In the digital age, personal identity increasingly depends on online platforms and digital communities. When someone builds their identity around specific platforms, brands, or online personas, that identity becomes strategic leverage. People will defend platforms they identify with as if defending themselves. They'll promote brands that reflect their self-image. They'll participate in communities that reinforce their identity. The modern strategic leader understands that capturing someone's identity creates more influence than capturing their attention. Identity is deeper, more persistent, and more strategically valuable than temporary engagement. Emotional dynamics at scale. Traditional emotional influence happened in small groups through direct contact. Digital emotional influence can spread across millions of people in hours through carefully designed content and algorithmic amplification. As studied by social psychologists, modern strategic leaders can trigger specific emotional responses across vast populations simultaneously. Viral content isn't accidental. It's engineered to spread by appealing to specific psychological triggers and social dynamics. Understanding how emotions spread through digital networks becomes essential for anyone seeking to build influence in the contemporary world. Chapter 7. The Future of Strategic Power, AI and Algorithmic Strategy. As artificial intelligence becomes more sophisticated, the line between human decision-making and algorithmic optimization will continue to blur. Future strategic leaders will be those who best understand how to work with AI systems rather than against them. This includes understanding how to train AI systems, how to interpret their outputs, and how to integrate artificial intelligence into human decision-making processes without losing strategic control. The risk is that AI systems designed by others could influence your thinking without your awareness. The opportunity is that well-designed AI systems could amplify your strategic capabilities beyond what's possible with human intelligence alone. Decentralized versus centralized systems, blockchain technology, and decentralized platforms create new possibilities for organizing influence without traditional hierarchical structures. However, early evidence suggests that even supposedly decentralized systems tend towards centralization over time. Future strategic leaders will need to understand both centralized and decentralized systems, when each is most effective, and how to operate across different organizational models simultaneously. The key insight: power is always being redistributed, never eliminated. Understanding new distribution mechanisms becomes crucial for maintaining influence as systems evolve. Global versus local influence. Digital platforms operate globally, while human psychology remains fundamentally local and tribal. Future strategic leaders will need to balance global reach with local relevance. Understanding how universal principles apply across different cultural contexts. This requires developing cultural intelligence, linguistic capabilities, and the ability to adapt strategies for different markets while maintaining consistent core objectives. The challenge is that what works in one culture may backfire in another, but the opportunity is that successful global influence creates unprecedented scale advantages. Machiavelli's core insight remains valid. Strategic advantage flows to those who understand human nature and apply that understanding more effectively than their competition. What's transformed is the scale, sophistication, and speed of influence mechanisms. The modern strategic leader operates in a world where traditional boundaries between politics, business, technology, and culture have dissolved. Success requires understanding how all these systems interact and influence each other. This isn't about becoming manipulative or exploitative. It's about understanding how influence actually functions in the digital age, so you can navigate it effectively and build genuine value for others while advancing your own objectives. The choice isn't whether to engage with power dynamics. They exist whether you acknowledge them or not. The choice is whether to understand them well enough to protect yourself from exploitation while building the strategic influence necessary to achieve your goals. The modern world rewards those who think strategically, act systematically, and adapt continuously. It punishes those who cling to outdated models, react emotionally, or ignore the realities of how influence operates at scale. In 1513, Machiavelli wrote The Prince as a guide for navigating the brutal realities of Renaissance politics. Today's strategic leaders face different challenges, but can apply the same fundamental insights: understand human psychology, think strategically, build sustainable influence, and never mistake the appearance of power for actual strategic capability. The game continues, the stakes are higher, the tools are more sophisticated, but the principles remain constant: clarity, strategy, and the discipline to see reality as it is, rather than as you wish it were. Machiavelli wrote, "Since love and fear can hardly exist together, if we must choose between them, it is far safer to be feared than loved." In the digital age, the safest strategic position is to be so valuable that others fear losing access to the value you provide.